What's up, everybody? It's Keezy. I'm back once again with a video for you. And as you guys know, I am a pro wrestling fan. This is a video from Wrestling Flashback. It's called What Makes Pro Wrestling the Greatest Show on Earth. Now, you guys know that I'm a wrestling fan. Been watching wrestling since like 3 years old. And I have a love-hate relationship with wrestling. Because when it's good, it's great. And when it's bad, you know it's bad. And like, there's just some things that you see in wrestling, like, that you just can't show other people. You know, there's just some things that, like, if you just put this on TV, they're just gonna look at you and like, why'd you make me watch this? Why'd you turn this on? So, wrestling, I would say, is not for everybody, which I understand. Just like with anime is not for everybody. But I feel like for someone who's new to wrestling, I feel like there's a little something for everybody, you know. Because as you guys would know, like, I'm trying to train to become a pro wrestler. Hopefully things work out. You know, I'll keep out updating it as things come along. But let's see what they have to say about wrestling being the greatest show on earth.
Professional wrestling, a form of entertainment loved for generations by millions of people around the world.
Also, acknowledge the tribal chief.
However, for many people, those two words still conjure up an image of something that's childish, with its fans perceived as unsophisticated, mindlessly cheering for scripted drama while ignoring the lack of genuine athletic competition.
I'm just gonna be honest, it's super gay. It's super gay. There's nothing wrong with being gay, nothing. And there's nothing wrong with being a fan of pro wrestling. But
that was a thing. Especially when I was growing up, people always like, "Oh, it's gay." I'm like, no, what? Like, people think pro wrestling is like they're so gay. Like, two grown men. Well, I mean, they do the same thing in UFC. They just focus on knocking each other out. And yes, wrestling is predetermined, but we all know that. This is some arguments when people make, oh, like, it's fake, or like we know. I watch wrestling. I know it's scripted. But the stuff they do on a daily basis can legit injure them, or like in some cases people died in the ring. I'm like, but for people who say the argument that wrestling is gay and like this all in tights grabbing and hugging each other, like they do the same thing in MMA when they try to get the correct hold on them to choke them out. Like, your argument is invalid.
it's the same thing.
Yeah, he's 40 years of age. He's walking around in a luminous orange t-shirt and a headband, talking about nobody can see him. We can see him right there. He's a big fat 40-year-old failed Mr. Olympian motherfucker. Do you know what I mean? That dweebs, those guys.
When you already know the Undertaker's gonna take out freaking Triple R or whatever his
Triple
name.
H,
Yeah,
come
Triple
on.
H. You already know it going into it.
It's just
See, I remember that interview that Chris Van Vliet did with that guy, and he was literally like correcting him, like Triple R. Even people who don't watch this know his name is Triple H. You know, it's just like, yes, we know it's predetermined. We watch it for the storylines and the action. It's the appreciation of what they do.
What all these guys are doing, it's fake, it's lame, it's stupid, it's gay, it doesn't make any sense.
It's frequently described by critics as a fake show, where big, strong actors pretend to fight. The stories are said to be silly, and the costumes are said to look ridiculous. They say it's all about making money by fooling.
And yet, people still go to the movies and watch those movies. People sit down and watch like shows on TV. It's literally the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. These men and women are doing live performances and legit putting their body at risk for the entertainment of other people.
Fans with made-up drama, bad acting, and over-the-top action. So assuming that this is true, and it is just fake melodramatic nonsense, have you ever stopped to wonder why for decades millions of people tune in each and every week to watch it, or why many more all around the world pay hundreds if not thousands of dollars to show up and watch it live? Surely there must be something more to it. Or for those of us who do watch it, that description couldn't be further from the truth. No, for us it's something far different, a totally unique art form that combines athleticism, storytelling, and and performance. The wrestlers are like actors and athletes in one, using their bodies to tell a story in the ring. The choreography of the moves, the character development, and the dramatic arcs all contribute to a unique and dynamic form of live theatre. Pro wrestling has its origins in the
and that was one thing I was talking about. Just imagine you sitting your friends down, just sitting somebody random down. They see Rikishi just giving somebody a stink face. Like, bro, they gonna look at you so like, what is this? What is this guy?
level circuits of the 1900s, with the idea during this time being that strongmen would simulate fights for audiences in order to draw in a crowd of paying spectators. Of course, that didn't mean there weren't real fighters taking part in this whole endeavor. No, occasionally such performers named shooters would be brought up to the stage later on in the show, from there challenging anyone in the audience to face them. Needless to say, when these shooters inevitably took down the audience member in question, any doubts about the legitimacy of what was going on was settled, at least temporarily. And that brings us
It's like you can see how long wrestling has been a thing. Like, go back like to where he said from then to now. It's like a worldwide thing. Hell, WWE is $1 billion company. Tony Khan runs AEW. And I think there's your individual shows. Like, you got wrestling in Japan, like all over the world. Like, just that's amazing how far wrestling has come.
Into the first element of what makes wrestling such a fascinating form of
emotion,
entertainment,
right there,
the
the
boundary
emotion.
it blurs between reality and fiction. Now there's a certain point in all of our wrestling fandoms, usually when we're pretty young, that we realize what we're seeing on screen isn't exactly real. After all, if Hulk Hogan is taking so many punches to the face, then how come he doesn't have any bruises? And if Bret Hart just got dropped on his head with a pile driver, then how in the hell is he walking around again a couple of minutes later? Well, the answer to that, as we all soon come to learn, is that it isn't a real fight. Rather, it's a stage one designed to look real. And it's our knowledge of this as we get older that makes wrestling so unique. Sure, when we
A lot of people say, like, why don't they see bruises? Like, oh, you see them. Like you see them. And also, they're moving, like, some people move really fast, like, in adrenaline, the other thing. But also, just suspend your disbelief as you would do any TV show or movie that you would watch. Like, obviously, it's scripted. Like, yes.
sit down to watch a movie, we all know the actors on screen aren't really the characters they're portraying. But with wrestling, it somehow feels different, as what we're watching clearly isn't a movie. No, it's something which presents itself as a sport
like a movie.
where athletes will take part in a physical competition with each other on a weekly basis. And because of this, it automatically feels more akin to watching something like boxing or the UFC, a far more legitimate endeavor. But as we've already said, this isn't real. This is purely performance art, so it gives us two very distinct ways in which we can enjoy it. If you're a modern wrestling fan with an online presence, then you're likely watching the show on two different levels, with one being the fiction which is playing out on screen, and the other being the often far more interesting stuff that's happening off screen. And again, while there is an element of this to most forms of entertainment, in wrestling, it's not uncommon for this off-screen discourse to completely dominate things and become the real story, with that same story sometimes even circling back around to the on-screen product again. Take the story of CM Punk. Back in the late 2000s, the WWE was the powerhouse of professional wrestling in the Western world, and the
Still is. You know, obviously there's TNA and AEW, but like when you think of like major companies, it's gonna be WWE. I don't think that's gonna change anytime soon. Like WWE is just too big at the moment, but yeah.
company most people who haven't even passing familiarity with the business are likely already aware of. At this time, they were at their absolute lowest when it came to the quality of their television, and the
There's just 2010s in general. Like that time period was so bad. It was so hard to watch, and during this time, but a lot of us kept watching. You know that they had their good moments. But like you said, with CM Punk in 2011, Summer of Punk and everything doing that. Well, not everything, but a lot of things dealing with that storyline was really good. But it's that time period from 2012 to like 2021, it was so hard to watch, y'all.
reason for this? Well, Vince McMahon, then owner of the company, had at some point during the decade completely lost touch with what his audience wanted to see. And so because of that, it often felt like watching a show which was specifically written to disappoint fans. Luckily for those fans, however, there was one bright beacon of hope, CM Punk, a cult hero who broke the rules at every point and who was very vocal about his distaste for the way the company was being run. In fact, in one now iconic moment in the summer of 2011, he would actually shatter the fourth wall when he cut a shoot promo.
Also, for those of you who don't know, CM Punk did return. to the WWE after people thought he would never come back. Because I was one of those people. I didn't think he was ever going to come back. Like, so if he can come back, anybody could. Hopefully AJ Lee comes back because she has some banger matches. And I know she can have at least one more run. At least one. That's just me being hopeful.
On an episode of Monday Night Raw.
There's one thing you're better at than I am, and that's kissing Vince McMahon's ass. I don't know if you're as good as Dwayne.
Dwayne, though, you can tell he felt most of this for real. Like, dude, I'm trying my hardest. Like,
though he's a pretty good ass kisser. Maybe this company will be better after Vince McMahon's dead, but the fact is, it's going to get taken over by his idiotic daughter and his doofus son-in-law and the rest of his stupid family.
Punk's words blurred the lines between scripted entertainment and real-life grievances. This speech resonated deeply with the segment of the audience that had given up on the product. Punk talked about his own dissatisfaction and feelings of being underappreciated within the company. His candid remarks about potentially leaving WWE when his contract expired added a layer of unpredictability and drama to the storyline. The promo was significant because it brought a raw, unfiltered perspective to WWE programming. It resonated with fans' real-life frustrations and transformed Punk's career while reinvigorating interest in the WWE product. This was a case of the fans not knowing if it was real or part of the story, which created so much intrigue.
I have had friends work for this company and be unceremoniously fired. They deserved it! They deserved it? They deserved it. Why? Because you don't know what makes a superstar in 2011?
CM Punk was just about the coolest thing in wrestling because in many ways,
same thing could be said to that he got up out of there. Because I don't know what Vince was smoking, but I'm glad he gone.
he became the voice of a whole generation of fans who felt like they weren't happy with what they were being given by WWE anymore. Unfortunately though, by the time it was all said and done, CM Punk would eventually quit WWE in protest over many of the same issues he first aired during his original shoot promo. In January of 2014, he would famously walk out on the company, and a few months later he would be formally fired on his wedding day. No prizes for guessing then that this left a lot of bad feelings between the two parties, with it feeling after a while that there would never be a reconciliation there. In fact, it got so bad that whenever WWE put on a particularly bad show over the remainder of the decade, fans would often drown out the proceedings with chants of CM Punk as a form of protest.
You're gonna have to be louder. Are you chanting Cena sucks?
Daniel, these people want you to quit, just like CM Punk did.
I ain't like Stephanie had the best comebacks for those chants. Stephanie had the best comebacks. I'm like, you could not get under her skin. She's a professional.
If you guys could keep that up for about 2 minutes and 15 seconds, you'd last 1 second longer than Punk did.
But that level of anger and frustration being directed towards the company wouldn't be entirely necessary by the time 2019 rolled around, as this was when an alternative league suddenly sprouted up in the form of All Elite Wrestling. In 2019, after years of dissatisfaction with the monopoly that Vince McMahon and the WWE effectively held over the North American wrestling industry, 4 performers, namely Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks, teamed up with the billionaire owner of both the Jacksonville Jaguars and Fulham Football Club, Tony Khan, to form the first real competition WWE
and competition that did give them. I mean, like, it's a nice alternative. People have other things they can do, like, and still get that national exposure on TV. Now, AEW, I don't watch AEW, to be honest with you. I don't have cable. I'm not paying $50 for a pay-per-view. I don't watch AEW, but I do keep up with some of it. I don't keep up with all of it, obviously. But like from that time period, they were consistently putting on better shows than WWE. Like, they had their bright spots. Don't get me wrong. They did have their bright spots. But if you're looking for a consistent basis for, like, really great matches, you watched AEW. Now, storyline-wise, you know, no, at that point, they put on better storyline. I mean, like, as of now, WWE's doing better. In terms of storylines, in my opinion, like I said, I keep up with some of the things AEW. I feel like that's one thing that AEW needs to get better at. For like long term wise, they do have their good stories on their show. But like for I guess it's the majority of it was like, yes, you put on a great match, but why do I care about this match? You know, I think that's at least for me is a disconnect. And also, like I said, I don't have cable, so I can't watch weekly. I feel like they need a streaming service. So that would also help. Because WWE has Peacock, and then in January, Raw is moving to Netflix. So that's a lot of eyes on your product. I think in the UK they still have the WWE Network. I feel like AEW would greatly benefit from a streaming service. They would get more people to watch your show. So if someone's like confused, they can just go to streaming, look at the most recent episode, then get caught up.
He had experience in almost 2 decades. This was a success right off the bat. After years of being desperate for something they could get invested in and enjoy on a level that wasn't hate-watching, AEW became the talk of the town for wrestling fans, with it at one point beginning to approach the level of TV ratings WWE were pulling in after only a couple of years of existence. That said, for as successful as AEW was, there was always that one final piece of the puzzle fans wanted to see added to it.
Another thing, I need AEW to book their women better. I just need them to book that's not just AEW, but it's mainly AEW because they do not book their women properly at all. I thought this is a thing in a lot of places. I think with the exception TNA and NXT, because even WWE main roster, like they need to book their women better. It's just a lot of places, and like Japan. That the women have their own show, but also at the same time, I feel like the women should also be integrated in some of the big programs as well to get more eyes on them. I feel like the women are very underappreciated in all of wrestling. I don't know if he'll talk about that, but if he does, I'll talk on it more.
And that was the inclusion of CM Punk, the man who in many ways symbolically started the whole revolution which led to the company being formed with his blistering shoot promo back in 2011. Cut to the summer of 2021, and after much speculation, word begins to filter around that yes, finally CM Punk has decided to return to wrestling. And while his name was never mentioned on TV during the lead up to the event, AEW made it very clear that he would be making his long anticipated return for them. What followed on from there was a moment.
But this is another thing that I don't know if anyone else has said this. They need to stop playing up to the dirt sheets. And yes, we knew CM Punk would return. Like obviously Chicago, it's gonna be a big pop, but they do this a lot. Let's say there's a rumor of someone, oh, this person signed to AEW. Like most people know who it is. But in the lead up, AEW they're gonna book a show in that person's hometown to get that pop. I feel like that makes it even more obvious that they did time. Because me personally, I hate spoilers. I hate it with a passion. I hate spoilers. Just let the moment play out.
Pure emotion. When Punk's music hit that night and he came out of the curtain, the camera literally picked up grown men in the audience who were in full-blown tears. Why were they so emotional? After all, this was just a wrestling show, right? Well, it was more than that to them, because what this moment represented was the climax of a decade-long saga of one man raging against the machine, ultimately failing and then coming back years later to help boost the upstart rebel group in their own fight. It was the kind of thing which was so long in its construction, it could never be fully portrayed in a 2-hour movie, and because so much of it was built around the real people behind the characters and not the characters themselves, it felt that much more real of a moment when Punk took the mic and thanked the fans for chanting his name all those years he'd been gone. Yes, it was a hell of a story, and goes to show that when it comes to wrestling in the modern day, reality often plays just as big of a role as the fiction. But the story didn't end there, as that's the beauty of wrestling. It's a continuous saga with so many twists and turns. During CM Punk's first year with AEW, rumors began circulating around backstage that he had used his influence to get a former friend of his, Colt Cabana.
I didn't see that. That's the first time seeing that footage. Like the Young Bucks and Kings just rolling their eyes. Like you could have just told King not to hire him. You didn't like it. And like I feel like a lot of backstage politics played a part in all of this.
fired from the company. And considering Colt Cabana was so well liked by others, particularly the Young Bucks, this left some ill feelings. And this all eventually led to things simmering to the point that during a press conference following their All Out 2022 pay-per-view, Punk decided to cut yet another shoot promo, with his ire this time being targeted at the people who he felt were wrongly spreading rumors about him, making him look bad.
What did I ever do in this world to deserve an empty-headed fucking dumb fuck like Hangman Adam Page to go out on national television and fucking go into business for himself?
Then after this was over, behind the scenes, he'd go back to his locker room where the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega decided to confront him over the comments he'd just made, leading to a legitimate brawl breaking out and all four men not only being suspended, but being stripped of the titles they held. Obviously then, as such suspensions directly affected storylines, it meant that they had to be addressed on television. So that's why the very next week, AEW owner Tony Khan spoke to the fans directly when he explained that yes, as a result of the very real fight which took place at All Out, all four men would be gone for the immediate future, and that the belts they held would be vacated. And once the knowledge was out there, anything which had been taking place in storylines suddenly felt far less important than what was really happening behind the scenes. Would the four men in question return? And if and when they did, would the whole thing be turned into a storyline? Those were the questions everyone had now, to the point that it became all anyone was talking about. Yes, by now reality had bled into the fiction in such a way that it became impossible to ignore. And the fiction started playing up to this too, because once everyone involved in the fight eventually returned to TV, they'd repeatedly take sly digs at each other on screen, despite the
I'm like, unless you're gonna make it in a storyline on TV, leave it alone. That's not just them, it's like all four of them. Like, if you're not gonna make the storyline, just leave it. Just leave it. Now, I feel like Tony should have handled the situation better as well. You know, you are the boss. Like, you gotta put your foot down. You gotta handle this yourself as well. Cause like, I feel like it was just pointless. Like just taking shots at all of them, just taking shots at each other. Like there's stuff you have to do. We have a job to do. We have to go out to entertain the people, and you can't be petty.
They now had to be segregated on separate shows on account of fears another fight would break out should they be allowed to be in the same building again.
That's because I am the one true, genuine article in a business full of counterfeit bucks.
And those fears of another fight breaking out eventually reached their peak at their All-In pay-per-view in 2023, where at an event filled with 72,000 people in Wembley Stadium, CM Punk got into another backstage fight, this time with real-life friend of the Young Bucks, Jack Perry. So as a result of that, he'd be fired from AEW outright, just as he was fired from WWE all those years prior. But from there, he would do the unthinkable. On November 25th, 2020,
he came back. And I was like, that was Jack Perry's fault. Like that, you had multiple people telling you don't use real glass. Just don't do it. You know, just don't. You have multiple people telling you, and you do it anyway. Like it didn't even make sense as to why he went. I wasn't there, so I'm just not gonna.
He'd returned to the company that fired him nearly a decade prior. That's right, after all those years of bad feeling, the whole thing appeared to have come full circle as Punk was right back where he started. And this tale of him going from champion of the people in WWE to exiled martyr to prodigal son making his return in AEW, all the way back to the employee of the company he once hated so much, is exactly the kind of story you'd be so hard pushed to find anywhere other than in the world of...
Now, this isn't even a story. This is real life. Like, I understand what he's saying. I do understand what he's saying. But that's not even a story. Like, it might be a personal story, like for like you, the viewer, and like on the real life feel of Brooks CM Punk. Like, but that wasn't a wrestling story at all. That was real life happening.
Professional wrestling, as it requires so many different elements of storyline and reality coming together in order to make it happen. The payoff was extraordinary, with fans all over the world losing their mind at the return.
Whether it's on the ballroom floor or in our personal lives, we love each other, we're here for each other.
I feel very free to be myself.
When we're all there together,
I'm on top of the world.
This is about.
And in many
Yes, it
ways, the
was his
story
hometown.
still isn't over. No, now it's just playing itself out in two separate companies because upon returning to WWE, CM Punk found himself being given a less than welcome response by many in the locker room, who were fearful that he'd bring his unprofessional behavior back over there with him. And this has led to most of his feuds since he's returned, focusing on his opponents, accusing him of being a toxic presence in general.
You spent 10 years slandering every single person back in that locker room.
I mean, he got it. He was bitten. I just love the storyline right now with him and Drew. I feel like that has to main event. It has to. You have to open the show or main event SummerSlam. I feel like they're gonna go with CM Punk and Seth Rollins next, probably for a WrestleMania feud. I'm sure it'll be a good one.
I don't want to spend one more second, one more ounce of energy on that hypocrite.
Meanwhile, back over in AEW, the Young Bucks would use real security footage from Wembley Stadium, showing the fight between Punk and Perry to start a whole new storyline.
That didn't really. Yeah, it started a storyline, but in the end, like for all the real life things, it didn't help Jack Perry out at all. They just because CM Punk did an interview where he described everything that happened, and they just proved that CM Punk wasn't lying. Like not that what they did, they started a storyline, but for like say real life things, it didn't help at all.
With all three now aligned together on screen for the first time, they've decided to enact a hostile takeover of the company after attacking their boss, Tony Khan. Really, where else could you get this level of layers in your entertainment? And it's not just the blurring of lines between reality and fiction that makes wrestling so special. No, there's so much more to it than just that. Because if you ignore all the real backstage fights and the legitimate politicking going on behind the scenes, and instead just focus purely on the fantasy you're seeing playing itself out on television, it's still captivating. And why is that? Well, because wrestling is totally unique in that it's not quite a sport and not quite theatre. Sure, it often portrays itself as a sport, but for every match which takes place, there's also a backstage segment or an in-ring interview which furthers storylines. So in many ways, it's just...
Well, not everyone. Even though some that need them don't have them sometimes, have to go online and find them. Some of the interviews they do online, show those on TV. You know, help them out.
It's as much live theatre as it is sport. Live theatre which can cover every aspect of the human condition, whether that be cathartic drama, such as the rise of Daniel Bryan in 2014, or pure comedy, which can be found in characters such as WWE's R-Truth or AEW's Orange Cassidy. And that's just the North American style of wrestling. On top of this, there's also the different variations of it across other different cultures. Take Japan, for example, probably the second biggest market for pro wrestling in the world. There, things are portrayed very differently, as rather than producing so much of the pantomimish storylines you would get in the North American wrestling, they instead treat things far more legitimately, with shows even often being reported on in real sports newspapers. And this is reflected in their overall presentation too, with shows usually being laid out like UFC or boxing cards, and any promo segments generally being done in the form of post-show press conference style interviews. Then there's somewhere like Mexico, a country with a proud wrestling tradition in itself, though their tradition is based far more on
I haven't even touched on the Mexican wrestling scene. Like Japan, they're so stiff over there, but the Mexican wrestling is so good as well.
Novella-style storytelling and incredibly acrobatic, high-flying theatrics. In fact, if you were to venture over there to watch a show from one of their top promotions, you'd see...
Look at that! It's so fun to watch the luchas and with the Mexican wrestling scene. They're so fun to watch. It's so fast. Like the way they do some of these moves, like at the speed they do it, amazing.
Something completely different to what you'd get anywhere else. An event that looks more like a Cirque du Soleil show than a soap opera you might get in the States. So if you're a fan of wrestling, then there's guaranteed to be something which can suit your own personal taste. In the modern day, where the once closely guarded secrets of the industry have long since been exposed, pro wrestling truly can be anything. All you need to have is an engaging character to root for, a character who people can live vicariously through. After all, this was exactly why audiences were so into pro wrestling back at the turn of the millennium, as with Stone Cold Steve Austin serving as the perfect avatar for blue-collar America. He was able to draw in fans in droves, who all secretly wished they could beat up their own boss on a weekly basis too. And it's
the fact that like I once said that pro wrestling would never be back at the height it was during the Attitude Era, but I might be wrong. Because it's so popular right now. It's like on the wrestling boom is there again. Like a lot more people are talking about pro wrestling, and like just it's great to see, you know?
The same reason why a
As a
whole new
fan,
generation
it's
of
great to
fans
see.
got so invested during the mid-2010s when the aforementioned Daniel Bryan rose to the top 2. In fact, the audience got so invested in him to the point that they actually took to hijacking shows in order to get him in the main event of WrestleMania. This is the power of finding a character a wrestling audience can really click with. And Austin and Bryan are far from the only characters who have fit this bill over the years when it comes to being overwhelmingly beloved by crowds both in attendance and watching at home. As there's also been the likes of Eddie Guerrero, Mick Foley, and Jeff Hardy, just to name a few. With the love fans feel for these people coming across as different to the love they might have for their favorite movie characters. As what we're seeing in the ring is often basically just a real life person with the volume turned up. That said, at the end of the day, no matter how many great characters you have and how great they are at making people fall in love with their personalities, in wrestling it will inevitably come down to a situation with 2 men or 2 women fighting inside of a ring. And that's the next part of what makes wrestling so special. The fact that even once you strip away all that artifice and all that pageantry, even when it just comes down to 2 people in a ring, it's still incredible. And that's because, like with the most accomplished dancers, wrestlers when they're at their best can tell a complete story through physicality alone. You only have to look as far as WrestleMania 21, which pitted Shawn Michaels against Kurt Angle.
One of the best wrestling matches ever, in my opinion. My favorite wrestling match of all time is Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker at WrestleMania 25. That's going to be my favorite, me personally. But this one right here is number 2 for me.
Of course, what makes this one immediately interesting is that heading into it, there was no clear dramatic storyline. The issue between them was primarily that each one wanted to prove they were the best wrestler in the world. Sure, they had stylistic differences, with the latter a legitimate Olympic gold medalist in amateur wrestling, while the former was more of a high flyer. But both could also work an all-rounder style too. With this being evident at the start of the bout, as much to the surprise of everyone, Michaels takes the early lead with a lot of technical ground-based moves. In fact, it's not until the 10-minute mark that things start shifting in the opposite direction, when upon almost getting caught in his opponent's dreaded ankle lock submission, Michaels retreated to the outside, and it's during a brief brawl there that Angle is able to slam the high flyer back into the steel ring post, slowing him down and impairing his chances of taking to the air as things progress. Following that, the Olympic gold medalist is an absolute machine as he sets about dissecting his opponent, hitting him with everything he has and eventually locking that ankle lock in, almost causing Michaels to have to quit there and then. Fortunately though, the wounded man is able to make it to the ropes, forcing his rival to break the hold. But by now, the damage is already done, and so despite making something of a brief comeback and at one point even hitting his signature Sweet Chin Music superkick finisher, he's too hurt to make the pin afterwards. And this leaves Angle with enough time to recover and once more get the upper hand, with him soon locking that ankle lock in all over again. This time though, he knows enough to keep his opponent in the middle of the ring, so there's nowhere for him to escape to. That's right, now Shawn can do nothing but lay there crying in pain for what feels like hours, unable to reach the rope. So with no other options left, he's eventually forced to tap out here and live to fight another day, ending one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time. Yes, this was a perfect example of how when wrestling is done properly, it can be everything in one, dramatic on the level of the best plays, engaging on the level of the best movies, and memorable on the level of the best music. And it can do it all without the people involved ever having to utter a
quick side note, Bray should have won that match.
Single word. But it's not all about technical mastery when it comes to telling a story in the ring. No, sometimes it can just be about sheer spectacle or brutality, such as can be seen in the work of someone like Gunther in WWE, particularly in the match he had with Sheamus at Clash at the Castle.
Gunther is such a hard hitter, but he's so good in the ring. Would I ever take a chop from Gunther? Willingly? No. He would chop the soul out of me.
In 2022, the story being told in the ring wasn't so much about the chess match-like intricacies of what moves the contestants were doing and when. Rather, it was simply about a big Irishman and an even bigger Austrian beating the ever-loving hell out of each other with chops and fists.
The Big E special, big meaty man bumping meat.
And if you ever needed evidence that wrestling has more reality to it than you'd think, this is the one to watch. As over the course of its 20-minute runtime, you can see the welts and the blood blisters form on the skin of both men as the physical assault they're enduring leaves its mark. Not that Gunther and Sheamus were actually trying to hurt each other here though. No, it was still very much a cooperative affair, with a predetermined winner, but with the style of each of these men being tough brawlers, and with them agreeing ahead of time to not hold back on one another, it allowed them to put on a more brutal affair than many MMA fights. An affair which eventually saw—
Did you see those pictures? No.
or Sheamus' life bar run out, as he simply couldn't take any more punishment. Then of course there are examples of stories in wrestling being told in a much more theatrical way, albeit still without any words being spoken. An absolutely perfect example of which can be found in the recent main event of WrestleMania 40, pitting undisputed WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns against his challenger Cody Rhodes. The story leading up to the whole thing was that for the 1,316 days leading up to this event, Roman Reigns had been absolutely unbeatable, someone who no one had an answer for. Hell, even for the year prior to that, at WrestleMania 39, Cody Rhodes had fallen to the champ and as a result, was left looking broken and defeated in the ring as the show went off the air. But over the year which followed, the challenger continued to build fan support, with this all leading to him eventually winning the Royal Rumble in January of 2024, and in the process of doing so, earning an opportunity to once more challenge for the title at WrestleMania. Of course, this opportunity was almost taken away from him when The Rock, the real-life cousin of Roman Reigns, returned to WWE early that year and tried to worm his way into the match itself. In the end though, fan backlash would see Cody get the match he deserved, and this led to the Showdown a year in the making on April 7th, 2024. A showdown which played out less like a technical chess match or a brutal shoot style fight, and more like WWE's own version of Avengers Endgame. Why was this? This was because various figures from the company's past and present appeared over the course of the bout to help even the odds, including current stars who had already been wronged by Roman such as Jey Uso and Seth Rollins, and old legends who also had a history with the men involved like John Cena and The Undertaker. And in the end, the sheer spectacle of what was taking place led to the crowd reaching a fever pitch, with things utterly exploding when after 33.5 minutes, Cody hit his finisher and pinned the champion to finally bring about the downfall of WWE's equivalent to Thanos, the Mad Titan. And it also links directly to our next reason for why wrestling is so special, the nostalgia effect. Now, nostalgia can be a powerful thing regardless of where it's found. After all, there's a reason why so many people get excited when a movie series from the past gets rebooted. That it's a just as powerful thing in the world of
Also, if you haven't seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, it's something, you know. I saw where they were going, but I still need some explanation.
Too, with the power of that nostalgia being perfectly evident in the aforementioned WrestleMania main event.
Okay, so with the WrestleMania main event, that's an example of using nostalgia in the correct way. Recently, with a lot of wrestling, they use nostalgia for everything. I'm like, yes, it's great to see them, but people like Goldberg, I don't need to see him as a champion. I don't need to see it. Want to make a one-off appearance, help get somebody else over? I got you. But for some of these, for so many people, I don't need to see a full run. Like if they can show that they still got it, I got you. But it doesn't have to be with a title involved. WrestleMania 40 was a good example of using nostalgia the correct way.
Go back and listen to it again. Hear the wild pop from the crowd when John Cena's music hits. It's as loud as it is because so many of those fans in attendance grew up watching him.
Resiliency!
It was so good. It was. If you haven't watched WrestleMania 40's main event from night 2, go watch this. The last 6 minutes.
And the same
match,
thing can be
crazy.
said for The Undertaker when he makes his arrival too. Hell, even The Rock, the man who's supposed to be one of the bad guys in this situation, gets his fair share of cheers too. This nostalgia is something wrestling frequently plays into, with it having so many decades of history. Another two examples were when Stone Cold Steve Austin returned from retirement to have a final bout at WrestleMania 38, and the other was Sting, having his own in-ring retirement at AEW's Revolution pay-per-view in 2024. Both these matches were emotional roller coasters, and amongst the best of their given years, and a large part of the reason for this was because we were getting to see these figures from our past have their last stand, and finally, after all this time, close out their stories. It was enough to make everyone who was in attendance, and those who were at a certain age, feel like kids again. And that just goes to show the strength wrestling has in being a never-ending story of sorts. Something which doesn't have an off-season, and which keeps going week in and week out, making new memories for new generations of fans, all while also paying homage to the stars of the past to try to keep older fans happy too. And all this brings us to the last element of what makes pro wrestling so special. The secret hidden ingredient we've been dancing around for a while now. The relationship it has with its fans. Now, to illustrate how important fan interaction is in wrestling, you only have to look back to the dreaded time that was 2020.
That was a tough time to watch. Now, they had their good moments. I ain't gonna lie to you. Look, Me personally, I thought they had some good wrestling moments in the pandemic era and the Thunderdome era. There was some good matches, but like, it was so hard to watch for no fans. Like, the fans play a big part in wrestling. Like, it was so awkward. Even if the matches are good, like, ooh. So that did take some creative freedoms with cinematic matches. Now, some were better than others. Some were hated for a lot more than they should have been hated on, because like, at least they're trying something different. Oh, of course, every execution is not going to be the best execution of it, but they did try, so I give them credit for that.
We were all on lockdown at home, so every sporting event was still going on with no live crowds in attendance. When it comes to wrestling, the fan interaction is such a big part of the show that it's pretty painful to go back and revisit this period now. And that's because with this being live theatre in many ways, getting the crowd to play a part in the show is crucial to taking something to that next level. Try going back and watching The Rock vs Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 18 with the sound off. It ends up being a pretty average affair, but turn the sound on and suddenly it's electric. With every movement the two men in the ring are making, causing the crowd to light up, and as a result, the whole thing feeling like the most important moment in the world. In fact, the crowd was such an important character in this match, they actually influenced how it ended, as while Hogan had gone into the night as the villain, by the time it was over an audible was called backstage and he was instructed to go full hero by helping The Rock to fend off an attack from Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And this is far from the only time wrestling fans have taken an okay show and turned it into something next level with their reactions alone. You only have to look as far as May of 2024, where we saw this very phenomenon in action.
Oh, wait a minute, time out. I'm not gonna say Backlash was an okay show. That was a fantastic show at Backlash. But the crowds made it that much
show
better.
Which was held live from Lyon, France. Sure, the show that night on its own was fine and had some pretty entertaining moments, but that crowd turned it into something which will never be forgotten. Seriously, there's not a moment where the 11,000 people in attendance aren't screaming at the top of their lungs. And when Jey Uso comes out to make his entrance, the sight of everyone waving their camera torches around in unison is nothing short of a spectacle which has to be seen to be fully appreciated. Sure, you do get great fan reactions in other sports, but the whole event doesn't rest on the shoulders of those reactions. When it comes to wrestling, however, fan reaction is the third competitor in the ring at all times, and if you remove it from the equation, wrestling loses its air of uniqueness, and that's a uniqueness which is built out of a variety of different elements we've explained in this video. You see, wrestling might seem silly to a casual observer, as at the end of the day it's men and women in their underwear pretending to fight one another, but if you look at it a little bit deeper than that, you'll see that it's an art form unlike anything else, and one which deserves to be treated just as seriously as movies or music. Yes, the stories can be a bit cheap at times, but in the context of WWE and other places like it, these are usually just a broad canvas for the performer to get their character across with. However, sometimes the stories can be a lot deeper and more engaging than people give them credit for, with them taking place over the course of years and covering all aspects of human emotion. And don't be fooled into thinking it's all just fake either, because not only is the physicality of what the wrestlers do all too real and all too painful, but the stories being told themselves can often become a lot more legitimate than you might think, leading to some utterly captivating moments when reality collides into fiction. So if you're not a fan, try checking it out sometime with this new perspective, and you might find that what you're seeing is a little different to what you expected.
You know, and there you have it. You know, sometimes you gotta take a different perspective when you're watching wrestling. You know, obviously it's not gonna be for everybody. I'm not saying that you like, oh, go watch wrestling right now. Like, no. If you want to check it out, but have an open mind when watching it, you know. You might just find something that you might like. But that's the end of this long video. Thanks for sitting here with me. Like I said, it's good to be back with you guys. I still do appreciate the messages. But don't forget to like this video. Comment what you want to see next, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.